All right. Donald Trump has multiple lawsuits coming against him. Some of them are falling in his favor. The mainstream media would have you believe he's going to be locked up next week and jailed for the rest of his life. We've got a lot of changes happening within the RNC. Democrats trying to use the mainstream media to their advantage to make Republicans look bad. To help me with that, I have Kurt Schlichter with me. Kurt, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So just some background for my viewers. You are a writer, you are an author, you are a lawyer, and I want to jump into some of the big stories happening in the news today. You had mentioned on Twitter that influencers that tell Republicans to only vote in person on election day are shills for the Democrat Party. What do you mean by that? And how should we be voting? Because it seems Democrats vote any way they can, while Republicans show up the night of, and then the machines have issues, the ballots have issues. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I believe what I said was not only that they were shills, but they were idiots, which I stand by. I mean, how many times do you have to put your hand on a hot grill before you realize that it's hot? Okay, we saw what happened in Arizona, for instance, and in Republican precincts there were a lot of problems and equipment failures, all on election day, all at Republican-leaning precincts. Let's assume, because it's usually better to assume stupidity than malice. Let's assume that this was just the routine incompetence of the bureaucrats. The effect is the same. If your vote depends on being at a certain time and place, you have what engineers call a single point of failure. Don't have a single point of failure. Tomorrow I'm going to be on an airplane. If airplanes had single points of failures, we would not have had 0 deaths in major airplane crashes in the last 15 years. They have redundancy. Redundancy is the key. And I don't know why this is hard. And I don't know why some dumb people have this as an article of faith that we have to vote on election day. That's not true. That's not the battlefield you're on. Now, if somebody said, Kurt, how would you run elections? I would run them like most of the civilized world. I would have one election day and you go and you show your ID and you write on paper ballot and it gets counted publicly. That's what I would do if I could. But, my magic wand isn't working. I can't make the world I want to happen. Just like I can't be dropped on the battlefield I choose back when I was a soldier. The battlefield we're on is long election periods with in-person voting, mail-in voting, and a variety of other ways to vote other than just showing up on election day. If you limit yourself to election day, your kid will get sick, your dog will get sick, your battery will go out. You will have to stay late at work. Something can happen. But if the first day I go and I vote and I get it done, it's done. Now, look, I'm a Californian. I vote by mail because most Californians do. And I get my ballot and I send it in and I get a little email that said, hey, we got your ballot. The idea that somehow they're going to segregate out Republican votes, while I have absolutely no doubt they'd be willing to do it, gives them an assumption of competency and capability that I just don't believe that they have. The question is not who you want elected. The question is whether who gets the greater number of votes counted and outside the margin of fraud, which is very small. And I don't have any illusions about election fraud. I worked for the Republicans in Nevada after the election. I was there that Wednesday night, and within an hour or two, we had found a dead person who voted. Okay, so I get it, it happened, but it's marginal. Okay, it is a relatively small number, usually in deep blue cities, and if you get enough votes, it is hard to cheat and successfully. Now, there are lots of ways to stop it. The Republicans should be engaging in litigation to clarify rules, to make sure that rules don't change at the end, to get orders that, you can't put up barriers so people can't see votes counted, that sort of thing. And of course, the Republicans under Ronna McDaniel were grossly incompetent and have failed to largely do that. And I'm hoping that they can get this on, because, as a trial lawyer for 30 years, I understand that if you don't win before the election, you will lose. You are going to lose your election challenge. I will bet that all day and all night. And if you're dumb enough to bet against me, I will take your money and I will buy my wife a Tesla. You have to, and this goes through a lot of things in law, Stephen, because I've been seeing a lot of terrible lawyering on Twitter. People who are either stupid or think you're stupid. Just saying the most ridiculous things about the law. There are some very basic concepts about the law. I wrote about recently at Town Hall, 2,400 words on, hey, normal people. Here's how kind of the law works. Here's where it's different with Trump, because there is a Trump exception. But you got to understand some things about human nature and about judges. Judges don't like to make controversial decisions. Okay, they will, and this is a bias in the law, is to try and avoid that. Now and that's not just in political cases; it's in all cases. Judges will avoid making a hard decision if they can. That's basically how our law is structured. You want to push off the decision. You want to push it down to juries as opposed to judges. So we see a lot of things that are gross injustices, and you're wondering why the judges don't act. There's kind of a bias against judges acting. There's a bias against dismissing cases. There is a bias against defaulting people. There is a bias towards pushing it down to a resolution through a trial or a settlement. That just is. And, sometimes that gets misinterpreted as bias. Sometimes it is bias. But it's, and when you're looking at election litigation, the Democrats win an election. What's the name of a judge who wants to overturn that? Or a Republican wins it? Who's the judge who wants to go in and say, yeah, I'm going to overturn the election? They're going to default to other procedures and avoid having to make that tough decision. Very occasionally, very rarely, unbelievably rarely. I think in North Carolina, they made them redo a congressional election a couple cycles ago. And that was just like nuts. That just doesn't happen. But so it's theoretically possible. Expecting the theoretically possible to happen is kind of a bad policy. Expecting things to be handled relatively normal, you're gonna have a better prediction rate if you do.
Yeah. Do you think the RNC was smart to cut ties with Ronna McDaniel? It seemed like
yeah, but that's like, already. I was one of the insurgents trying to help Harmeet Dillon take over the RNC, and for reasons that included Trump's active advocacy for her. And again, I'm a big Trump supporter, but Trump is terrible on personnel often, and he supported Ronna, and I watched her chief of staff literally whipping votes for Ronna. Okay. So Trump backed Ronna. He picked Ronna. Ronna was a disaster. He also got rid of Ronna eventually. No, she was terrible. She was not qualified to do it. She didn't have the killer instinct. She wanted to go on TV and be a commentator. Well, that didn't work out so great. But I would be watching, Fox over the last year, and Ronna would show up, and she'd start talking about policy. Who elected Ronna to talk about policy? We elected Ronna to set up an infrastructure to support the Republican election efforts. That's what the RNC does. I don't care what she thinks about abortion or gun control. I assume she thinks the same thing I do, but who cares? Her job was logistics and administration. And as an Army officer, I understand that, professionals talk logistics, amateurs talk strategy and operations. Her job was to set up a system where Republicans could realize and bank the votes that they need to win. Well, she wasn't doing that. She was, spending all, I mean, she was fundraising and she was okay at that for a while. She was a disaster in the last year. I mean, would you write a check to Ronna McDaniel after 7 cycles of failure? Come on. I mean, it's stupid. I'm very happy with the way Michael Whatley and Laura Trump have come in. I think Laura Trump, who, another nepotism pick, I think, frankly, she's done some great things. Her immediate message, I'm going to go and get a picture taken with Scott Presler, hero of the grassroots, a guy out there hands-on doing it. He's going to stay at his own organization, but that's okay. They're going to work together, and they're on the same team. And that was, Rona was too stupid to do the easiest thing in the world, which is go get a picture taken with this guy and say, hey, we're supporting you, we back you, we're all on the same team. She wouldn't, because he was critical. Her petty personal nonsense kept her from doing a great job. I'm optimistic about the current group. Obviously, they have to prove themselves, but I haven't seen a misstep yet.
Didn't they just announce they raised like $60 million in the month of March ever since?
Wonderful. That's exactly great. That's what they were supposed to do. And and maybe it's going to come out that Laura Trump was a genius pick. Again, she seems to be doing a great job. Obviously, always be suspicious when, it just happens to be my cousin. When it's Romney's cousin, be really suspicious. But no, she's done a great job so far. And, but, I'm entirely unsentimental about these people. If she starts doing a bad job tomorrow, boot her. What have you done for me lately? One of the problems with Republicans is we are sentimental. But in business, we're not sentimental. If you own a business and somebody's not performing, you show them the door. Why do we not do that with politicians? I mean, I'm personally close to a couple politicians, at least friendly. But they need to, and I'll certainly help them out if they need a ride to the airport. But if you're not cutting it, I'm going to support your opponent, because you are unimportant. Their career is unimportant. Their personal feelings are unimportant to me. Politicians are tools to be used to execute a specific objective, and we need to look at them like that. And once we have that honest relationship, I guarantee they will perform better.
Yeah. Well, I live here in Utah, and the writing was on the wall that Mitt Romney was definitely going to be booted. So he decided to retire, but that's because he knew that we were about to fire him for being a terrible politician.
Well, look, Utah, of course, has some structural and historical reasons that make it a little odd, but it also falls into the red state problem, which is in a red state, deep red state. If you want to get elected to anything, for all practical purposes, you need to be a Republican. So look, a party should shoot for about 50% plus one. You guys will have in a deep red state, you guys will have 70%. This isn't just Utah. Look at Idaho, Texas. You start putting up things like, oh, I don't think a guy with a penis should be in a teenage girl's locker room. And suddenly you get a bunch of Republicans going, well, I don't know. That seems very harsh. That seems like, I'm going to get a lot of feedback at the country club about that. And they're soft. Deep red Republicans tend to be softer than in California. In California, we're pretty hard. Those of us who are here. And in fact, there are a whole bunch here. It's weird. I keep meeting Republicans here. They're just, because we have 36 million people, there are a lot of Republicans, and they're conservative. They're not soft. Organizations, so I think that's an interesting phenomenon. Why a deep red state like Utah, which agrees generally with pretty much everything I agree with, will send somebody like Romney in, because you have so many moderate Republicans because they can't go be Democrats effectively.
Yeah. I was just in California for the last week, and I was shocked how many Trump supporting signs, MAGA hats, t-shirts I didn't see one single sign or T-shirt with Joe Biden's name on it. Not one. And
I don't think anybody likes Biden. I think, I think the hatred of Trump, which is irrational and stupid, is much greater than any love for Biden. I think everybody understands that Biden's a senile old weirdo, a mean, bitter clown, full of envy and resentment. I mean, he is his bizarre need to lie about his own achievements. I mean, it's mortifying. It's embarrassing. If Joe Biden was the politician that he tried to be, which is, pleasant, affable, he believes in what he believes in, but, he's got a good sense of humor, man, he'd be super successful. And if he wasn't let himself be dragged farther to the left, but he doesn't believe in anything, so it doesn't matter. But if he was what he was selling, I think he'd be a very successful. I think he'd be like Bill Clinton, who an astonishing number of Republicans don't hate. They're like, I disagree with a lot of things, and he was kind of a freak, but he didn't feel like Bill Clinton hated you. His hideous wife, now we knew she hated us.
Yeah.
And she does hate us. And a lot of them hate us. I really think that if the Democrats figured out how to channel Bill Clinton, they'd be very successful.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good point. You've got this legal background. What are your thoughts on the different Trump lawsuits? Letitia James, Fonnie Willis.
I get asked about, Kurt, you're a lawyer. What's your legal opinion of these things? And I don't have a legal opinion. These aren't lawsuits or criminal complaints in the sense they are, this does not look like the kind of law I practiced in state and federal courts for 30 years. It's not. It's complete. It is the Trump exception in action. The special set of rules that apply only to Trump or Trump adjacent people that get rid of all the norms and the rules and the commonly understood principles. And it's okay because Trump's literally Hitler. So let's go be literally Hitler. And they are literally Hitler. The thing is, a lot of these lawsuits and criminal complaints will survive initial contact with trial court judges, because, like I said, trial court judges are either, are typically unwilling to make tough final decisions themselves. They always want to push them away. So a lot of stuff that should be dismissed doesn't get dismissed. And that's not just for Trump. That's like for a lot of criminal defendants and a lot of civil cases as well. But they're going to start hitting the Court of Appeals. And we've seen what happens as these things go up to the Supreme Court. Remember, all these genius, brilliant lawyers, like Michael Luttig, Lawrence Tribe, we're telling you how brilliant this one neat trick to throw Trump off the ballot through the 14th Amendment was, and how it was like beyond any debate, and how you're a racist transphobe if you don't understand that this ruling of four of seven Democrats on the Colorado Supreme Court was untouchable, a masterwork of legal things, and it gets shot to ribbons 9-0 at the Supreme Court. I mean, Sotomayor and Brown and Kate are not having any of this. And our legal system is corrupt and broken. It's not completely corrupt or completely broken. And every criminal complaint is complete nonsense. I mean, they're just nonsense. It's just baloney. And when you start asking even basic questions like, well, Jack Smith, what jury instruction, you allege these crimes. They're unusual because no one has ever alleged them ever before. There's one giveaway. So we don't have standard jury instructions on them, right? Because there's standard jury instruction. You and me, if I rear end your car, there's standard negligence jury instructions, standard debt. But this involves some weird legal issues. There's not standard jury instructions. What's a judge do? Okay, parties, I'd like you to write me some proposed jury instructions that you think reflect the law as the jury should apply it. And then we'll look at those and we'll figure out the jury instructions. And they go nuts. Literally something that happens in every case where you have a relatively unusual issue, which I don't think anybody can argue this isn't. And they go nuts because now Jack Smith has to sit down and explain the law as he sees it applied to Trump and these facts. And he doesn't want to do that. Because then he's going to have to answer some very ugly questions because, you know, despite what he says, there's some issues with the Presidential Records Act. All right. And you've got a law that handles presidential records. What's the law say? How's it apply to these facts? I don't know, because no one does Presidential Records Act litigation, because this is a unique case that's never been brought before. Again, something that should trigger your suspicion immediately, because, you know, if I'm going to prosecute somebody that half of America wants to elect president, I probably shouldn't be doing it on new legal theories that have never come out before. The shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, you know, we got pretty good common law background on how, you know, how to handle people killing each other. Okay, nothing unusual there. Pretty clear rules, right? How's the Presidential Records Act, is classification ability work towards this, and does, you know, what security does he have to have for things? A little more opaque, but it also doesn't help that you have a former vice president who's doing the exact same thing. Oh, that's okay because reasons and so forth. Well, she hasn't ruled on the selective prosecution issue. And there's you know, that would seem to be a pretty good issue. Oh, that's a total nonsense, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, don't listen to anybody on Twitter except me and the people I tell you are good, because a lot of these people are idiots, or they think you're an idiot. I mean, the idea that, you know, the 14th Amendment argument had no counter argument, when they're telling you it has no counter, there couldn't possibly be a coherent argument against this brilliant one neat trick that's going to suddenly get me everything I want. The idea that there's no legal counter argument, that's literally an insane position or a lie. Of course there's a counter argument, and you know what? Everybody who matters believed the counter argument. 9-zip, buddy. And we're going to see a lot of that on these other ridiculous cases. As for the civil lawsuits where they're trying to bankrupt him, I don't think they're going anywhere. Again, novel theories, never brought before against anyone else, totally different, including by folks who came into office promising to find something to use to engage in legal proceedings against Trump. Now, if that's the kind of system you want, you got to remember you're not always going to be in charge of everything. And it's going to happen to you. And I do think it should happen to them. I think we should give them the new rules good and hard. Because there's no, unless they are punished, there will never be any incentive to change. And B, I don't want to be their bitch. You know, I'm just not going to take it. You know, you do to me, I'm going to do to you. And we need to do, and the Republicans need to embrace that. I know there's a lot of turn the other cheek Republicans. That's not human nature. Okay, you cannot allow yourself to be abused and then propose that you are the obstacle to people abusing us, which is what Republicans are. Republicans should be protecting us from the rampages of the damn communists. And if they refuse to do it because they're gentlemen or norms or some other reason, then they are useless. You know, if you wonder why you get Trump, go back to where George Bush refused to fight back when he was called, you know, Bush, Hitler, Trump, Halliburton, or whatever. You know, a lot of us stood up for him, and he wouldn't stand up for himself because he was a gentleman. And making it even worse is when Trump came along, Bush suddenly turned on us, the people who've been supporting him. So, there's not a lot of people I have more contempt for than George W. Bush.
Yeah, I knew you and I had something in common.
Yeah, I just, he just really has very little character in my
Yeah,
view. He could have done tremendous good by getting out there and saying, hey, people are hurt, people are upset. What happened in Iraq, what I did in Iraq did not work the way I want. I made mistakes. No, no, you're just bad people because you've looked for an alternative. If he wants to find out who gave us Trump, he should find a mirror.
yeah. I've never seen a former president tuck his tail and run and hide more than George Bush. I mean,
I don't even ask him to be out there, right? And I think there's a lot to be said about a president who goes off and stays out of politics, who retires. We have way too many old guys still wielding influence on both parties. McConnell, who I thought was a tremendous tactician, even though he drove me crazy with a lot of his policy stuff. Guy's 82, he's had a stroke, he should go away. Okay, but he's going to hang on for a while, and I understand it's to preserve the Senate seat, whatever. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, Biden, obviously, senile pervert. Yeah, they've really screwed Gen X. The boomers just, Gen X is basically that generation is going to pass, and none of them are going to be president.
wow. Okay, tell me, thank you for all of this. This has been really insightful, but I want to hear about your book, The Attack. What's in it? What are we going to learn? And then I'll point people towards it.
My new book, my new novel is The Attack. It is a bestseller, #1 military thriller on Amazon. It's been out for about 3 months. It is originally, right after October 7th happened, I wanted to write about terrorism and our vulnerabilities here in America. And I was talking to Regnery about it, and the editor at Regnery, Harry Crocker, said, you ought to do it as fiction. And I thought that is a genius maneuver. And I wrote it as a novel, but it's a little unusual as a novel because it basically is 40 stories of 40 people, what they experienced during a terrible terrorist attack in the United States. And using that format, I didn't have to have like a Forrest Gump character who went everywhere and just happened to be where all the exciting stuff was happening. I wanted to show how vulnerable we are, how the enemy would plan, what the enemy would do. And how Americans would react. Normal Americans, you're out shopping. Suddenly, hundreds, thousands of these, mass shooter events. Because that's it's a very easy tactic. We saw it in Moscow. Lightly trained guys with simple automatic weapons going on killing sprees. I point everybody to that couple of idiots in Boston with the pressure cookers and a couple of handguns. They shut down a major metropolis for 3 days. 2 untrained guys with light weapons. I mean, hell, you and I probably have more weapons than they do within arm's reach of us right now. And they shut down a city. Imagine an open southern border allowing to infiltrate people in. They don't have to be trained out. You don't need command and control. You just need Tuesday at 9 a.m., be here and kill everyone you see. What happens? Police aren't designed for that. The Army's not designed for that. I know, I was in the Army for 27 years. Asymmetrical warfare puts the few strengths that the enemy has against our few weaknesses. And one of the strengths is the ability to motivate suicidal people who do not need command and control. They don't need logistics. They don't need communications. You don't need medical support. You're not going to evacuate them. This becomes a huge threat. And what are some of the things that can deal with that threat? Well, armed citizens who know how to do basic first aid, which I think every American citizen should know. I think you shouldn't be able to graduate from high school unless you know how to stop the arterial bleeding, for instance. Just because every one of us has come across car accident or somebody who's cut himself on a bandsaw or something. It really, we have a lot of vulnerabilities, but we have a lot of strength in America too. And in the attack, I talk about that, and I do it through stories. People telling their own stories, different people. A Secret Service guy guarding our incompetent president, a general, an HVAC repairman, a housewife, a border patrolman. What do they see? How does it build up into a big picture? And it's been, it's like 4.8 on Amazon. It's got like about 2,000 reviews. People are knocked out by it. It's, I've written a lot of fiction, written a lot of regular stuff, but people are moved by it. There's some stuff that's pretty sad. There's some stuff that you'll go, oh hell yeah. I wanted to hit people in the gut, and the attack is designed to do that. That's why it's a novel, so it has the impact. And if you come out of it, I want you thinking, okay, what can I do to prepare if something goes wrong? What can I, how can I, you can't control anything but yourself, but you can control yourself. What can you do? And the attack lets you think about that. There's a little humor in it. It is not a Bataan death march. Okay, when I write novels, and I think this is my 9th or 10th or 11th novel, I don't even remember, including the Kelly Turnbull People's Republic series, which is just sold hundreds of thousands of copies. My rule is all good parts. So if you're looking for somebody in there to talk about how his relationship with his dad wasn't like perfect, that's not my book. Okay, no, my book is all about interesting stuff all the time. And I'm pretty happy with it. People seem to be liking the attack and learning from it, and thinking about, if the attack happens, what am I going to do? How can I make myself less vulnerable? How can I contribute?
Yeah, well, it's well written. I recommend people get it. I'm going to leave a link down below. It does go. I kept reading all the different cities and the attacks, and at first I didn't pick up that it was a novel. I was like, oh my gosh, these stories are so, because I read so much news that it was like, I felt like I was reading actual stories. So it is well written. It's why I wanted to have you on. Kurt, thank you so much for coming on, helping us understand what's going on. All of us need to toughen up and continue to fight for our country. And I appreciate you coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.